Okay, so I think we were right at the diabetics or the cruises, insulin or their cruise.
They're gonna die.
I guess I should establish, for those of you who aren't aware, that insulin is necessary for some diabetics. There's insulin-dependent diabetics, and if you are an insulin-dependent diabetic and you don't have insulin, you die. So now that we've got the utter importance of that established, for which one will quantity demanded decrease the most when the price drops, or price increases 20%? Caribbean cruises. Yeah, there's a lot of people who will spontaneously find that their need to go on a Caribbean cruise has decreased significantly when the price goes up by a fifth. The number of people who decide that all of a sudden they don't need insulin just because the price goes up 20%, fairly minimal. Will there be some people who no longer demand insulin or demand less of it? Unfortunately, yeah. Our society is such that there are some people who will have to make that decision between maybe feeding their kids or getting their insulin. So, little or no decrease in demand for the insulin, and the cruise, you're going to see some pretty good shifting along the curve there. Just spend a weekend in Miami instead. I know. So your lesson is that price elasticity is higher for luxuries than it is for necessities. Your demand for necessities is far less flexible, far less elastic than it is for luxuries. If Starbucks doubled in price, would you have to have your half-calf double mocha frappuccino latte every day? Yes, you would, Swift.
Yeah.
You're addicted. It's like insulin.
Yeah.
You have a problem. The first step is admitting you have a problem. All right. Now, one thing that we have not considered is time. And time is important in this. And so the elasticity of demand for gas in the short run versus in the long run. Okay? Gas goes up 20%. Does quantity demanded drop more today or more 6 months from now?
More today.
Discord. All right, 6 months from now, state your case. Taylor?
Because the people already have their cars and stuff, and so they're like, they can't immediately find another way of transportation, but in 6 months they'll start to realize their gas is adding up and find a new way.
Okay. Taylor says because you've already got your car and your lifestyle, and it takes time to adjust to work the gas out of that. Defend your case, Miss Today.
Well, like, gas prices, normally, if they, like, go up, they're only up for a couple weeks. And, like, they eventually come back down. And so, people, it probably, like, expectations a little bit.
So gas prices fluctuate more frequently than that.
Wouldn't it be, like, consumer expectations? Because you would expect it to come back down.
So because I expect that gas prices will come back down, I'll buy less right now and just plan to fill up next week.
Or, like, carpool.
Okay. Let's poll the whole class. Long term, greater decrease. Short term, greater decrease. There's too many of you who didn't take a position. Long term? Short term? There's not much you can do to change your usage in the short term. If the bus is available, hop on it. Try and arrange some carpools. But in the long run, you can move closer to your work or find a different job or buy a different car. Sorry, Taylor's right. It's the situation that it does take time to adjust because gas is pretty close to a necessity in our American lifestyle. We just don't have the transit system, especially around here, to allow you to just go cold turkey on gas. Now, could you decrease your demand somewhat? Probably. How many of you sometimes just get in the car and go drive? It tends to be somewhat of a teenage pastime. If you truly understood the entire economic cost of just getting in the car and driving, you probably wouldn't. And we'll work on establishing that. So your lesson is price elasticity is higher in the long run than it is in the short run.
Have anything for me?
You made progress. You turned in 2 current events, but still have 1.
Yeah, I didn't have time. I should do the big one.
You're almost off.
So the more time you have to adjust, the more elastic your demand will be. So let's break down these determinants. How available are close substitutes? And it does need to be a pretty close substitute. How available, or I'm sorry, is it a luxury or a necessity? Is it a broad or narrow definition? Are we saying transportation or are we saying moped? Okay. And then how much time do you have to adjust? Yes, Kavanaugh.
So I have a question because yesterday my dad was saying something about how like Kellogg's was not doing very well. They don't have a lot of money left over and they're kind of on the down. But I was wondering how that could really happen because you still need something to eat. But how can they go down? But none of the other substitutes show an increase.
General Mills.
So the question is, how can Kellogg's be suffering business-wise? And the assertion is that none of the other substitutes are profiting.
Like any more than they have been.
Did you actually research that and you know that General Mills is not?
I just haven't seen anything with it.
Okay. Don't assume that cereal is the only substitute for cereal. We talked yesterday, Eggo, plus eating habits are changing. There's been a lot of pressure to get away from carbs in diets, and cereal is pretty much all carbs all the way. And even the other products that Kellogg's manufactures, cereal bars, they don't have product diversity within their line. You also can't assume that business failure on the part of Kellogg's in terms of lack of cash reserves and stuff is solely due to a change in sales. It may be mismanagement. They may be overproducing in some areas where indicators should have told them stop. Labor contracts may have gone not in their favor. Their costs may have risen and they may not have passed that on to the consumers. There's a lot of factors that you don't necessarily know about. You can't assume that it all comes straight out of supply and demand. Maddie.
Okay, on that note, my dad actually works for Kellogg's, so what's happening there is that they're making way more cereal and way more product than what they're actually selling. So there's been like weeks this summer where they just shut down the plant and nobody works because they have so much excess cereal and they're just not putting it out and selling it.
So I'll repeat that for the podcast. Maddie's dad works at Kellogg's and says that they've been over manufacturing some of their cereals, and so for certain weeks this summer they've just shut down the plant because they have too much in inventory. And so I was kind of guessing right when I said it may just be mismanagement within the company that's part of the problem. So.
And then it's like also the labor contracts because they're like negotiating contracts right now.
Yeah, so the labor negotiations affects it too. Now, the question is, are they over manufacturing because demand is down and they haven't adjusted their supply? Or are they over manufacturing because they've been trying to meet requirements of a labor contract, and so you know, if you're supposed to provide X number of hours of work for employees, do you pay them to not come in, or do you just go ahead and manufacture and hope the product sells? Or is there a problem with advertising? You know, it's difficult to diagnose from the outside.
You never really see Kellogg commercials or anything like that.
Oh, come on, Tony the Tiger?
You haven't seen a new
Snap,
one?
Crackle, Pop, Rice Krispies.
No, you don't see anymore.
You don't need.
I don't see it,
Everyone,
at
everyone
least.
knows what Rice Krispies.
Little kids,
We
we
do,
do,
but
little
little
kids.
Yeah, we.
Yeah, how much time do you spend watching Saturday morning cartoons now?
I mean, I have to be home on a Saturday morning.
Okay. All right. So, what does elasticity look like when we graph it? What's it look like when we put it on an actual curve? As Kyle, who maths, told us yesterday, this is just slope. And he's right. The flatter the curve, the more elastic it is. The more vertical the curve or the steeper the curve, the less elastic it is. So with your arm, show me a pretty elastic curve. If you are showing me a horizontal curve, you are showing me a perfectly elastic curve. I said show me a pretty elastic curve. Tilt that angle up just a little. Good. Now if I say show me a pretty inelastic curve, you don't want to be straight vertical. That is perfectly inelastic. You want to be just a little off to the edge. Good. Good. Okay. You're going to love this. There are 5 different classifications of demand curves when it comes to elasticity. And there was much rejoicing. What? No Monty Python fans in here? And there was much rejoicing? Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
I've seen that.
Oh. All right, I'll have to show you. We'll do this first one. This is an extreme case. Very rarely will you ever find perfectly inelastic demand. Perfectly inelastic demand. And what that means is I don't care what you charge, because it's perfectly vertical, right? I need this much of this commodity no matter how much you charge me for it. Insulin comes pretty close. If you have one of those babies who can't take breast milk and it can't take, the first 3 kinds of formula, and you finally find a formula that it can drink, guess what your demand for that formula tends to be? Perfectly inelastic. Keep that baby alive, you will pay whatever it takes. Right? Chemotherapy comes close. Medical treatments. Okay. Water. Right? If you were part of a Chilean soccer team whose plane crashed high in the Andes, what would your demand for food be? It would be perfectly inelastic. If you could pay money for it, you would pay whatever it took, right?
So is it basically when there's no substitutes?
Yeah, it has to be pretty much a zero substitute situation. Yeah, your price sensitivity is 0. No matter how much the price falls or rises. And it's not like you stock up on it if the price goes down. Okay. If you are fatally allergic to something, your demand for an EpiPen is going to be inelastic. Okay. If you're one of those kids who smells peanuts 3 rooms down the hall and starts to have an allergic reaction, you've got to have that EpiPen. Right? There are entire schools that are peanut-free zones or nut-free zones. And other kids aren't allowed to even have peanut butter or Nutter Butter cookies or anything like that in the entire school.
How do
I'd transfer.
Me too.
I think my peanut butter fix.
But what if you ate it before? And
Okay, we'll stop here.
What do you think?